You walk into a room and nobody notices. You speak and people talk over you. You make a point and someone else repeats it 30 seconds later, and suddenly it's a great idea. You stand in a meeting, a conversation, a social circle, and you feel it. That invisible wall. The unspoken signal that says you don't register as a threat. You don't register as anything. And you've told yourself it's fine. That status doesn't matter. That real men don't care about dominance. That's a lie. And you know it. Here's the thing. Every social interaction has a hierarchy. Every room has a silent negotiation happening before a single word is spoken. And most men lose that negotiation before they open their mouths, because they've never learned the only language that operates at that level. Miyamoto Musashi understood this. In 400 years of dueling culture, survival didn't go to the loudest man in the room. It went to the man who controlled the field before the blade was ever drawn. That principle has a name. It's called Sen No Sen. And today, you're going to learn how to use it. Most men think dominance is about reaction speed. They think winning a confrontation means responding faster, hitting harder, talking louder. That's reactive thinking. That's prey behavior. And modern life has manufactured an entire generation of reactive men. Here's the diagnosis. Your nervous system is being hijacked. Every notification, every scroll, every dopamine hit from social media is training your brain to operate in a permanent state of micro-anxiety. Neuroscience calls this hypervigilance. Your amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain, is chronically activated. And a hypervigilant brain cannot project calm authority. It leaks, it twitches, it signals weakness without your conscious permission. This is why you react instead of lead. Sen No Sen is a concept drawn directly from the Book of Five Rings, Musashi's foundational text on strategy. In Japanese martial theory, there are 3 levels of initiative in combat. Go No Sen means responding after an attack has been launched. Sen No Sen means preempting an attack in the moment of commitment. But Sen No Sen, the middle principle, is the most strategic. It means reading the opponent's intention and acting before the attack fully develops. You don't wait. You don't just react. You move into the opponent's mind and disrupt the plan before the body executes it. Applied to nonverbal dynamics, this is the art of projecting such composed, calibrated physical presence that the other person's psychological momentum collapses before they can weaponize it. Think about what that means in a corporate meeting, in a negotiation, in a confrontation where someone is testing your frame. Now understand what the aura of the Ronin actually is. A Ronin, a masterless samurai, operated without institutional protection. He had no lord to back his status. His authority was entirely self-generated. His presence had to communicate competence, controlled danger, and absolute internal stillness. Not aggression. Never aggression. Aggression is a stress response. What the Ronin projected was something colder. Inevitability. This is what breaks another man's confidence before he speaks. Stop wasting energy on words. The physical architecture of dominance is specific. It is not posture as gym culture defines it. It is occupying your full spatial claim. Both feet flat on the floor, hip width apart. Weight distributed evenly. No crossed arms, which signals self-protection. No leaning forward compulsively when someone challenges you. That forward lean is a tell. It says you need their approval to feel safe. Stillness communicates that you have already won the calculation internally. Eye contact is a weapon when it is calm, and it is a surrender when it is anxious. There is a difference between staring someone down and simply not breaking contact out of discomfort. Train the second. Musashi wrote in the Gorin no Sho that the gaze must be broad, taking in the full field rather than fixing on a single point. Wide awareness. not locked intensity. This peripheral, relaxed gaze is neurologically associated with low arousal states. It communicates that you are not threatened, because you are not. And when a man's nervous system registers your non-reaction to his dominance attempt, his own threat response escalates. He overextends, and that is when you already own the room. There is a moment in combat that lasts less than a second, and inside that moment is everything. Takuan Soho, the 17th century Zen monk and close philosophical advisor to Musashi, described this moment in his text, The Unfettered Mind, written originally as a series of letters to sword masters. He used an analogy that cuts clean: the spark and the flint. When flint strikes steel, the spark does not deliberate. It doesn't calculate its trajectory or weigh the options. The spark exists in the instant of contact, arising without hesitation, without the interference of conscious thought. It is pure, immediate, and complete. Takuan's argument was this: the sword master who has truly trained his mind does not think during the strike. The moment thought arises, the moment the practitioner mentally reaches for a technique or consciously decides to move, that gap opens. That hesitation, invisible to the naked eye, is enough. A trained opponent reads it. The mind has stopped, as Takuan phrased it, and a stopped mind is a dead one. He called the dangerous state Mushin no Kokoro, mind of no mind. Not blankness, not passivity, but total fluid presence, unattached to any single object of attention, allowing response to arise without the friction of deliberation. Picture this: it's feudal Japan. Two men face each other. One man's gaze fixes on his opponent's sword hand. His attention locks there, waiting for the draw. In that moment of fixation, he has already lost. His mind has stopped at the hand. His response is now one cognitive step behind reality. The other man's gaze is diffuse. He sees the whole field. He reads not the sword hand, but the subtle shift in his opponent's shoulder, the microscopic change in breathing, the tension entering the jaw. He reads intention, not action. And before the action launches, he has already moved. The spark and the flint. Here's the connection to your life. Every social challenge you face has a tell. A micro-movement before the attack. The colleague who is about to undermine you in a meeting telegraphs it seconds before he speaks. The person attempting to publicly diminish you shifts their posture before they open their mouth. Most men miss this entirely because they are focused on the wrong level of the interaction. They are waiting for the sword hand. Sen No Sen is not magic. It is the result of trained attention. Takuan's teaching, interpreted in the context of Musashi's dueling philosophy, points to the same truth. The man who has done the internal work, who has cleared his mind of chronic anxiety and reactive patterning, perceives at a different resolution than the man who has not. You don't need to be faster. You need to be cleaner. A mind uncluttered by emotional noise processes reality without lag. And in social dynamics, as in sword combat, the man with the shorter lag wins. The spark doesn't think. It just arrives. And that is the entirety of the advantage. The face leaks truth. Paul Ekman's research on micro-expressions, conducted across multiple decades and cross-cultural studies, established that the human face produces involuntary emotional signals lasting between 1/15th and 1/25th of a second. These expressions are not chosen. They arise from the limbic system before the prefrontal cortex can censor them. Contempt, fear, disgust, anger, they flash and vanish, but they tell you everything about what is actually happening beneath the social performance. This is modern science confirming what Musashi described as reading the spirit of the enemy. In the Gorin no Sho, Musashi writes about perceiving the adversary's rhythm, their timing, the internal cadence that governs their movement. He was describing the same signal layer. Not what a man says, not even primarily what he does, but what leaks out between the two. Train your perception here. In a conversation, instead of preparing your next point, allocate a portion of your attention to the other person's face and body. Watch for the flash of contempt when you speak, the micro-tightening of the jaw when you hold ground, the downward gaze flicker that signals a failed attempt at dominance. You're not cataloging data obsessively. You're reading the field. Wide gaze. Unfixed attention. Now understand the concept of killing the intent. This is drawn from Musashi's strategic principle of disrupting the enemy's plan at its root rather than fighting its expression. In the Book of Five Rings, he writes about destroying the enemy's rhythm, making their strategy collapse before it can be fully deployed. The modern application is specific. When you detect a dominance move forming, you neutralize it before it materializes. Not with aggression, with reframing. Someone builds toward a public diminishment. You shift the conversational frame 2 beats before they arrive. You ask a question that redirects the field. You respond to something they haven't said yet, signaling that you already saw the move and that you've already moved past it. The attack lands in empty space. Their psychological momentum evaporates, and you do this without raising your voice, without heat. Don't flinch. Emotional immunity is the hardest and most important of these skills. Dokodo, Musashi's final written work, a set of 21 precepts composed days before his death, includes a principle that translates roughly as, do not hold on to desire for things beyond your control. The emotional version of this is detachment from the need to be respected in any given moment. The man who needs immediate validation from every interaction is perpetually vulnerable to insult. When an insult lands and you don't react, you have taken something from your adversary. He used energy. He used social capital. He expected a return, a flinch, a flush of color, a tightening jaw. And you gave him nothing. That nothing is devastating to him, because it means his weapon doesn't work on you. And a man whose weapons don't work has already lost. These are not suggestions. This is the protocol. Timing your entry. When you walk into a room, never rush. This is not theatrics. This is biology. A person moving quickly signals urgency, which the nervous system reads as threat or anxiety. A person moving at a deliberate, unhurried pace signals that they are not under pressure, that they own their time. Arrive slightly after the group has assembled when the context permits it. Let the room orient to you, not you to the room. And when you leave, leave before the energy depletes. Musashi's principle of knowing when a battle is complete applies directly here. Don't linger past your peak presence. Exit clean. If you're the last to leave every gathering, you've already given away the frame. The samurai code of appearance. Musashi lived with radical simplicity. He famously declined to maintain elaborate dress, yet by his later years his presence alone was sufficient to silence rooms. But this is not a license for neglect. Musashi's simplicity was intentional, considered. The principle is not poverty of appearance. It is signal efficiency. Every element of your physical presentation sends a message before you open your mouth. Clothing that fits precisely, not expensively, but deliberately. Grooming that signals discipline, not vanity. These are not aesthetic choices. They are strategic ones. The first cognitive assessment another person makes of you takes approximately 100 milliseconds. According to research by Princeton psychologist Alex Todorov, 100 milliseconds. You have no words in that window. You have only the visual signal. Clean your signal. Fit your clothes. Handle your grooming. Remove anything that makes you look like you gave up. Vocal tonality. This is where most men bleed status without knowing it. Pitch rises under stress. This is a neurological stress response. Laryngeal tension caused by the sympathetic nervous system activating. When a man speaks under social pressure with a rising inflection at the end of statements, he is broadcasting biological anxiety to everyone in the room. Drop the pitch. Slow the pace. Research in social psychology, including studies on voice and perceived authority, consistently shows that lower pitch and slower delivery rate are associated with higher perceived status and credibility. This is not accent. This is not volume. You don't need to be louder. You need to be slower and lower. Breathe from the diaphragm before you speak. Not a visible dramatic breath. A quiet reset. This lowers laryngeal tension physiologically, drops your pitch naturally, and gives you an extra half second of composure before your words arrive. That half second is the difference between a reactive man and a strategic one. Speak less. Mean more. Every unnecessary word you add to a statement dilutes its weight. Musashi won duels with economy of motion. Win conversations with economy of language. Say the point. Stop. Let the silence carry the weight. The silence after a precise statement is not awkward. It's pressure, and it belongs to you. Robert Greene didn't discover this. He documented it. In the 48 Laws of Power, Law 4 reads, "Always say less than necessary." Greene's research across hundreds of historical case studies arrived at the same conclusion Musashi and Takuan reached through Blade and meditation. The man who speaks too much gives his position away. He reveals his reasoning, his insecurities, his need to be understood. He hands his adversary a map of his interior. Greene writes that powerful people impress and intimidate by saying less. The more you say, the more ordinary you appear. The less you say, the more the other person's imagination fills the silence. And imagination almost always inflates power, not diminishes it. This is not strategic silence as a manipulation technique. This is the natural output of a man who has nothing to prove. Here's the hard truth. The reason you overtalk, the reason you explain yourself when no explanation was asked for, the reason you justify your decisions to people who haven't earned the right to evaluate them, is because somewhere in your nervous system there is still a need for their approval. Destroy that need. That's the work. The concept of the unmovable object in Musashi's philosophy is not passivity. It is not the Stoic fantasy of feeling nothing. It is the result of having cleared the internal noise to the point where external pressure lands on a stable structure and dissipates. In Dokodo, Musashi wrote about transcending love and hatred of the world, not because the world doesn't matter, but because attachment to its judgment is the primary source of strategic vulnerability. The man who cannot be moved by praise or insult operates at a different level. His decisions are not contaminated by the audience. His presence is not dependent on their reaction. And that independence reads, physically and socially, as the most dangerous thing in the room. Not a threat, not aggression. Something quieter and colder. Someone who simply doesn't need this to go any particular way. This is what you are building. Not an image, not a persona, a structure. Internal, trained, consistent. Katana mindset exists for one reason: to forge that structure in the men who are willing to do the actual work. Not the men who want motivation, not the men who need a hug. The men who are ready to pick up the blade and apply it to themselves first. If this channel is what you've been looking for, you already know what to do. Subscribe, because the next video will cut deeper than this one. And if you're still on the fence, ask yourself honestly, how long are you going to keep losing rooms you should own? The world doesn't pause while you decide. Master yourself, or the world will master you.